There's only so much this organization, which part of its role really was to act as a deterrence force for Iran. It would be very difficult for it to act at this point in time. Zana Khudr, Al Jazeera, Beirut, southern suburbs.
At least 18 people across Pakistan have been killed following protests against the assassination of Iran's supreme leader. Kamal Haider reports now from Islamabad.
Thousands of protesters, as you can see, including women and children, men, people of all ages, have come out across Pakistan to protest the killing of the spiritual leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in Iran. They say that this is unacceptable. They're shouting death to America. 9 people have already been killed as they tried to get into the US consulate in Karachi. And as you can see, thousands of people have gathered here in Islamabad. They wanted to go to the US embassy for the protest. However, they have been stopped by the security forces just on the outskirts of where the red zone starts. This is indeed a volatile situation. People are angry that Iran has been attacked by the United States and Israel. People are angry that Iran has been attacked.
Definitely in Pakistan, the sitting government is responsible. They are believed to be puppets of Israel and the USA, and they follow their instructions. They should be blamed for what happened in Karachi.
They have martyred our leader. Our hearts are mourning. You are a Muslim too. Ask yourself. What they have done is a tremendous tragedy, and they are not stopping the atrocities. May Allah curse them.
This is something which is unacceptable. The popular sentiment across Pakistan is anti-American, and they're also angry at their government for not saying or doing enough. This, of course, is going to continue for some time. People here are determined, and large crowds are still gathering outside the red zone here in Islamabad. Kamal Haider, Al Jazeera, Islamabad.
Al Jazeera's Asad Beg is in Karachi, where many breached the outer wall of the US consulate.
These protests have been taking place across the country, here in Karachi, in Islamabad, in Peshawar, in the north, in Gilgit and Baltistan. Now, what I can tell you what happened this morning was, upon hearing that news of the assassination of the Iranian leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, protesters, hundreds of them, took march towards the American consulate. Now, we understand that they managed to breach the front gate, the outer walls, and then they were fired upon. 9 people killed here. But in other protests across the country, we understand 1 person has been killed in Islamabad and 6 in the north of the country. And it's important to note here that Pakistan has the 2nd largest Shia Muslim population in the world, estimates between 17 to 26 million, but also a strong relationship with Iran. There's about 700,000 Pakistani pilgrims that travel to Iran annually. Now, the Prime Minister, Shahbaz Sharif, has come out saying that it's extending his condolences to the people of Iran, calling Ayatollah Khamenei a martyr. The Interior Minister also has come out and says that this is a time of grieving and expressing his condolences, but urging people of Pakistan to use lawful means to protest and not take the law into their own hands. But it's important to note it's not just Shia Muslims that are protesting. There's also Sunnis that are getting involved in these protests, because this is not just about the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei. This is about the anti-US sentiment, the anti-Israeli sentiment within the country, which is very, very strong.
Let's take a look now at the life of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Al Jazeera's Victoria Gatenby reports.
Born into a clerical family, Ali Khamenei studied at the religious seminary in Qom. Influenced by Ayatollah Khomeini's revolutionary ideas, he actively participated in anti-monarchy protests in the lead-up to the 1979 revolution. Khamenei became a leading figure in establishing a new Iran. When Khomeini died in 1989, he became supreme leader, a surprise candidate. In the early 1990s, Iran began to reclaim a broader regional role. The 2003 US invasion of Iraq gave Iran the opportunity to establish allied groups in Iraq. When the Arab Spring erupted in 2010, Iran supported Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's military suppression of the opposition, and its influence expanded in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon and Yemen, which Iran refers to as the axis of resistance. At home, Khamenei's leadership faced its strongest challenge during the 2009 presidential election, when many took to the streets for months, claiming the election was rigged. The country faced socio-political tension and economic devastation as Western sanctions devastated its economy. In 2015, Khamenei authorized Iran to sign a nuclear deal with world powers, most notably the US, under which Iran agreed to reduce its uranium enrichment in exchange for the lifting of Western sanctions. But the US withdrew from the agreement in 2018 under President Trump. In 2020, the United States assassinated Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani, further deteriorating Iran's relations with the West. In 2022, there were nationwide protests against Mahsa Amini's death in police custody after she was accused of violating the mandatory hijab law. After the Hamas-led attack on October 7, 2023, Israel targeted Iranian officials, including its embassy in Damascus. Israel assassinated Hamas's political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and killed Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Iran's most important ally in the region. Iran retaliated by firing nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. Khamenei called for regional cooperation to stop Israel.
The policies adopted by our enemy are to sow the seeds of division and sedition, to drive a wedge among all the Muslims. They are the enemies of the Palestinians, Lebanese, Egyptians, Yemenis, Syrians and Iraqis.
Tensions flared again after protests broke out in Iran in December 2025. President Trump said he would attack Iran if it executed hundreds of protesters. Washington began a rapid and large-scale military build-up in the region, and Khamenei warned that any military conflict would not be contained within Iran's borders.
To anyone who seeks to attack, the Iranian nation will deliver a strong blow. Americans should also know that if they start a war this time, it will be a regional war.
Weeks of diplomatic effort to de-escalate followed, with Oman mediating 3 rounds of indirect talks between the US and Iran. Iran had proposed a deal authorized by Khamenei, but on the eve of further talks, Israel and the US attacked Iran. With the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran now stands at a historic crossroads, facing a future without the man who'd guided the nation through turbulent times for decades.
Mohammed Saloom is with us once again in the studio. I want to talk to you about what we were talking to our chief US correspondent about earlier on. Trump's interview with the magazine. He says he's spoken to the new Iranian leadership and they want to do a deal with him. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that is expected. And Iran its leadership has been decapitated, it has been hit hard. They can see that the US and Israel have almost complete control over the skies. And so probably it is in their interest to seek a deal. I mean, they have been, a few days ago, they have been on the table of negotiations. They have been in Geneva, they have been before that in Oman, in Muscat, and also the negotiations indirectly were going on before that. So they want a deal, but they want a deal that would, favor their conditions. At the moment, they are under a lot of pressure from the US, military pressure, losing their command and control. I mean, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is not easy to replace, and it will take time for Iran to recover from that.
I should clarify that Trump hasn't actually spoken to them yet. He's agreed to talk to them. Without a supreme leader, who's in charge in Iran right now?
It's the president of Iran de facto, but it is distributed. So the political, if you like, the political leadership with the president, the military leadership is with the Minister of Defense, whoever is, replacing the assassinated Minister of Defense of Iran. And the religious leadership is within the new council that is supposed to elect a new supreme leader, but that is a process, that would take a lot of time. And also, it's not only confined to the legitimacy of the leadership in Iran, of the supreme leader in Iran, but also to the proxies of Iran in the region, in Lebanon and Iraq and beyond. So I think that would take some time. And the leadership now, the political leadership, rests with the president.
Could competing factions inside the Iranian system now turn on each other?
They could, but I think at this point, it's improbable because Iran is still holding together. They're trying to figure out what to do next. Probably the political and the religious leadership are trying to consolidate power within and see what is next. They already have their plans. The military is acting on almost autopilot. They have all the plans set for months now, who to attack, where and when, and what kind of weapons to use, in which scenario. But that would have to be led by a new leadership soon. So I think Iran has a few days, but not a few weeks.
You say a few days. Does Iran's leadership structure actually make the succession process easier than many of us outside of Iran might think?
It's not easy, no. So because it's complicated, the regime itself, part of its domestic resilience is this distribution of power. But it is very complicated for the regime to have a new supreme leader. They can replace anybody else easily, but not the supreme leader. That's why there is a lot of chatter, not only outside Iran, but also within Iran about who's going to be the next supreme leader.
We saw pictures of people out on the streets mourning the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Is there any realistic prospect that any of this produces popular unrest, or is it more likely now that as the nation is under attack, people will rally around the leadership?
Well, there is no leadership to rally around. And also, there is a base that is supportive of the regime, obviously, but also there is a massive base that is anti-regime. I mean, the demonstrations that we had over the last few months are evidence to that the Iranian people have had enough with the current regime and that they took the streets. Obviously, even the traders, the merchants, the markets, they were protesting against the very bad economic situation in Iran. So with the effects of the current war, there is no hope for the Iranians with the current regime, because the current regime is making it really hard to reconcile with the West, with the US, and also with Europe. So I think, there is a potential for that, and I think this is what President Trump and Israel are betting on.
However, Iran is retaliating. There may be no leadership to rally around, as you said at the moment, but Iran is continuing to retaliate against the attacks by the US and Israel. Do you think that Washington and Tel Aviv fully anticipated just how far Iran would be willing to escalate?
Definitely, the assessments are there. The US and Israel obviously know Iran very well. Otherwise, they wouldn't reach half of the leadership within the first few hours of the attack. So they have intel on the ground what Iran has and what doesn't have, and what are their plans and how far they could go. And I think now it is not in Iran's favor, this situation, because Iran does not have the leadership to lead it out of this, while the US and Israel are well prepared and ready to continue this fight.
Mohammed, good to talk to you again. Many thanks indeed. Let's take a closer look at the latest situation in the Strait of Hormuz. Several ships have already been struck by projectiles fired across the Arabian Gulf. Shipping companies have told their oil and gas tankers to drop anchor, bringing shipments to a halt. In total, around 150 tankers have stopped their journeys in or out of the region. The Strait's narrow passage offers few points of safety, and insurers of the ships are asking for high rates or even reportedly trying to cancel contracts due to the conflict. The largest concentration of ships at anchor has formed off the northern coast of Oman, just east of the Strait. Other groupings of tankers are near the port of Dubai, as well as off the coast of Kuwait and Bahrain. As we said, an oil tanker has been attacked in the Strait of Hormuz. That's one of the most important sea passageways. With the latest escalations, crude oil shipments have now been suspended. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is about 33 kilometers wide, but its shipping lanes are even narrower. Iran controls the north side of the strait, while Oman controls the south. China takes the vast majority of Iran's crude exports. Around 45% of its total crude imports transit the Strait of Hormuz. Our correspondent Katrina Yu is in Beijing with more on how China's concerns about how it'll be affected. Our correspondent Katrina
It's concerned about the disruption to the global energy market and indeed its own energy needs. Now, China doesn't release very exact figures as to how much oil it imports from Iran. We know that oil in general makes up about a fifth of China's entire energy needs in this country. 70% of all China's oil is imported. Now, 40 to 50% of that comes from Gulf states such as Kuwait and Iraq, and pretty much all of that Gulf oil flowing to China flows through the Strait of Hormuz. So this, any possible closure, any possible disruption will be shocking for China, but indeed not completely surprising. It has been watching these tensions escalate over the past few weeks, no doubt making some contingency plans. Beijing has options. It could possibly import more oil from non-Middle Eastern countries such as Russia, Kazakhstan, even Brazil to make up any possible shortfall. It may also be forced to release some of its own strategic reserves. In the short term, though, I think we can expect to see China continue to call for a halt to any attacks, for de-escalation, for a return to the negotiating table by all parties involved. I think we are also likely to see China call for any of that conflict to stay clear of the strait, to continue to allow any shipments of oil to flow through there, because of course this is going to affect the entire energy market, and China, as its economy is slowing, does not want to see this surge in oil prices that any closure of the strait will definitely cause.
Nada Habibi is a professor of practice in the economics of the Middle East at Brandeis University. He says the price of crude oil will go up, but will gradually decrease depending on the conflict.
The crude oil market is a global market, so definitely the impact would be global in terms of prices. However, the spike, in my opinion, would be short term. We have seen the impact of previous conflicts, such as the 1991 conflict when United States tried to liberate Kuwait. There was a spike, and then the prices returned to normal levels. Here we might see the same. Of course, depends on how long this conflict will last, but definitely in the short term, even starting next week, I believe there would be at least a 10 to 15% increase in price of crude oil. It can escalate to about 100, but if the conflict or the intensity of the conflict is contained, that will gradually reduce, decline over time.
Rob Geist-Pinfold is a lecturer in international security at King's College London. He says that Iran is taking a huge risk by attacking its allies in the Gulf.
The Gulf states, pretty much every single one of them, from what we know, didn't let the US use the bases in their country to strike Iran. The Gulf states have been lobbying relentlessly against a US or an Israeli attack on Iran, and they've had channels of communication to Tehran to try and mediate a deal that stops any sort of war from emerging. Now Iran has thrown all of that on the bonfire. They've completely burned their bridges, attacking Gulf states like Oman, like Qatar, states that have kept the channel of communication open for a very, very long time. And that shows you how Iran's strategy has changed and how they really feel like this is an existential moment for them. The lesson that Iran took from the 12-day war, June of last year, with Israel, is that it can no longer count on its allies throughout the region, the so-called axis of resistance, because they're too weak or they're basically going their own way. It needs to invest in its ballistic missile stockpile. The Iranians feel like this is what actually deterred Israel from a long war, and this is what actually caused significant damage to Israel, to its society, and to its economy. It's now turning that ballistic missile stock not primarily towards Israel, but towards the Gulf states to try and induce the same outcome, a fast ceasefire. The problem that the US and Israel face is that they simply can't take out enough ballistic missiles to prevent that scenario from happening. And we're not just talking missiles, we're also talking relatively low-tech Shahed suicide drones, which have been causing a lot of damage in the Gulf states right now. So this is Iran's one last remaining trump card. It still has the ability to do enough damage to cause chaos, not just to harm the region, but also if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, to damage oil production and really hurt taxpayers in the West even. This is an area responsible for 20 to 30% of oil supply. So Iran is banking that any long-term conflict is in no one's interest. So it's trying to escalate to end this as quickly as possible.
It is very nearly 1700 hours GMT, 8 o'clock in Doha. This is Al Jazeera with continuing coverage of the joint Israeli and US attacks on Iran. I'm Adrian Finnegan. President Donald Trump says he wants to talk to Iran's new leadership. In an interview to US media, he said that Tehran waited too long to make a deal and, quote, they should have given what was very practical and easy to do. Earlier, Oman said that Iran is open to any serious efforts at de-escalation. Well, those comments come as the US Military Central Command says that 3 service members have been killed and 5 are seriously wounded. It added that several others sustained minor shrapnel injuries and concussions and are in the process of being returned to duty. Israel, meanwhile, has continued its strikes for a second day, saying it's targeting ballistic missile and aerial defense systems. Thick clouds of smoke engulfed residential areas in the Iranian capital as many looked for shelter. Iran says the number of female students killed in an attack on Saturday has risen to 165. Well, Iran has retaliated by targeting the central city of Beit Shemesh in Israel, killing at least 9 people. At least 57 others have been injured, and emergency teams are at the scene. Israel's military says that it's investigating why its air defense system failed to intercept the missiles. We have a team of correspondents covering the latest developments for us in Tehran, in Washington, D.C., in Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank. Let's first go to Washington and our chief U.S. correspondent, Alan Fisher. Alan, what more do we know about these comments in the Atlantic magazine attributed to President Trump saying that he wants to talk to Iran?
Well, he says that he'll be interested to find out who's on the other end of the phone because of the damage they've done to the Iranian leadership. It's certainly a move to try and start steps to bring this war to an end. Just 24 hours ago, Donald Trump was saying that the war would end when they decided that they'd achieved their objectives, which of course was outlined as regime change. But what they have is maybe a change at the top at the moment. So has it reached US goals? Is this a point where they're ready to carry out discussions? He says he's willing to talk in the next couple of days. But of course, people will point to the discussions that were going on with Oman, the Omani chief negotiator saying that he thought they had the heart of a deal, that it was ready to be signed, and then the United States launched the attack. But Donald Trump has said in the past that he's about to talk, he's ready to talk, he's willing to talk, and nothing really has developed from that. So it'll be interesting to see what does actually develop over the next 48, 72 hours.
Alan, Iran's foreign minister told Al Jazeera that Tehran won't bow down and has the right to defend itself. Al-Zawahiri said that the actions of Israel and the US will not